right, folks. Well, you know you're in for a treat when you hear that tune because it's time for another edition of the Rec Poker Podcast. In case you don't know, Rec Poker is a positive and encouraging poker learning community where recreational players like us can get together to learn together, to beat up on each other in the play money home games, and to share our love of poker with the rest of the poker world. Most of what we do here is completely free. So I have to start by thanking our sponsors, the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack and Casino, and of course, website AMP. And I have to also thank some of our premium members who really help us out a lot. We really rely on the support of our premium members. $15 a month doesn't seem like a lot, but it makes a big difference to us. So folks like Mark Bloomberg, who's a fearsome competitor in our home games quite a bit, and is often here in the winner's circle, and folks like Troy Chapman, who's very actively involved in our training discussions. And Troy and I are working on a couple things that I think the rest of Rec Poker Nation is going to be very excited to see very soon. But enough about that. I'm your host this week. My name is Jim Reid. I've got the best job in the world because I get to hang out here with the rest of the Wrecking Crew and talk to exciting guests in the poker world every week. But I mention the Wrecking Crew because it's really a team effort here. So if you want to find out more about me, you can go to rec.poker/crew, where you can hear about more about the Wrecking Crew. And you can also just listen up because you're about to meet some of them right here.
So I'm Chris Jones. You can find me 5B5 on Twitter or 5x5 on the PokerStars home game.
And I'm John Somsky. I am Poker Geek MN everywhere.
I'm Kim Kilroy. I'm Pat Vat 33 in most places, Fergie 56 on the home game.
And I'm Rob Washam, and I'm Rabman 50 just about everywhere.
You know, Kim, that's my bit. I'm the one that mutes themselves and starts talking.
Yeah,
no
that's right.
Stealing my humor material.
That's right, Kim. Quit mowing John's lawn over there. So we're about to start a fantastic interview with Andrew Brokos, one of my favorite people in the world of poker. But before we do, I just want to make sure people know about Rec Poker Weekend coming up on June 24th and 25th. If you're in Minnesota, you got to get yourself down to Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack and Casino. We're going to be doing a Rec Poker tournament series down there with prizes to be won, cash to be won. We're going to do a point series over the course of the different tournaments in play. That's going to be great. And if you're not around, but if you're down in Vegas on Monday, June 27th, we're going to be getting together somewhere near the Bally's facility at 10 a.m. We'll have a Rec Poker meetup for all the WSOP fans that are down there and get a chance to go and have fun and hang out with fun folks. Fun folks like Andrew freaking Brokos. It's not his first time on the show, but I am very excited to have him back. And if folks stick around, if you're watching on YouTube, I encourage all our listeners to go head over to YouTube for free. You can follow along every week and ask questions of our guests in real time. But you can also win a prize. Every week we're giving away a prize of some kind. This week we've got a chance to get a copy of Andrew's new book, Essential Poker Concepts Volume 2. And we'll talk to Andrew a little bit about that as we get going. But Andrew, thank you so much for coming back on the Rec Poker Podcast, man. This is great.
Thank you for having me. And while you're right that it's not my first time here, I believe it is my first time here with video. So drink it in, folks.
Yeah, that's right. You got to appreciate that beard in all its glory. Andrew, would you say that you're more famous these days for your poker skill or for the beard?
I mean, it's really for the podcast, which, I guess a lot of people know about the beard, but the voice is, I mean, it used to be that was the only thing. Like when I was making poker videos and doing the podcast and before I was photographed quite as often as I am now, no one would recognize me until I spoke. And then as soon as I spoke, I would, sort of see the heads turn and you'd know who was...
It's true. It is it's a distinctive voice. And I think, the Thinking Poker podcast was one of the first serious podcast that I started listening to, and it's been a very formative influence on a lot of poker players of our generation. So I think the odds of someone recognizing any podcast voice around the poker table, yours is going to be at the top of the list. You recently we'll get into it a little bit. You've got a new co-host now. Nate Meyvis is no more on the show.
On the show. He is still.
Yes, yeah, good point.
He is still here on the earth, as far as I know.
So he sadly missed it.
That's how you become the new co-host. You have to kill the old one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, poor Nate. He really should have read the fine print when you signed him up the first time. But Carlos really wanted the job, and that is the only way to get it. So
yeah, these are Dothraki rules on the podcast.
Nice. Well, let's start with that. What's different having Carlos on as a co-host as opposed to having Nate on as the co-host? Is the banter different? Is the way that you prep or record different? What's different in the world?
I think the biggest thing is just sort of fresh energy. Nate and I had been doing it for a long time, and Nate was, when started, he was still a very serious poker player. He didn't have any children. He now has 2 children, has a full-time job, is not really playing that much poker anymore. And I think he was still enjoying doing it, but he just didn't have, sort of the time or energy. And it did a lot to, the pace at which the show was coming out was going more slowly. I was doing more solo episodes, and it's really been a great injection of fresh energy. Carlos, we have our own dynamic. Obviously, he had been a big part of the show. Prior to that, he was our most frequent guest. He was my personal favorite. I think like our single best episode was the first time that we interviewed Carlos. I sometimes say that like essentially the reason we started the show, even though we didn't know Carlos existed at the time, the reason we started the show was in order to meet Carlos. But then he had some of his own ideas. I asked him like, well, who are people that you would like to interview? Because I sort of have a long kind of vague list of like, oh, it'd be nice to talk to so and so, but having the impetus to reach out to specific people or to have him put other people on my radar who hadn't been on there, or to bring back guests that we'd liked previously, to have that impetus to say, oh, hey, you've been on our show, but you haven't had a chance to talk to Carlos. And it's such a yes, this is the same person as from coaching Carlos on Tournament Poker Edge. Yeah, so that's been really nice, and of course he has his own personality and relationship with poker, and now he has a WSOP bracelet as well. So
amazing.
Adding one of those to our repertoire is certainly a feather in the cap.
Good point. Yeah, and certainly couldn't happen to a better guy either. Now, does he give you the full credit that you deserve for launching him onto the poker scene? Because I know he was going to make his way onto it anyway, but I feel like you really got his first foot in the door on the show.
Yes, he does. And I think also, I feel like getting the benefit of having him as a co-host, that's more than reward enough, at this point. I don't think he would dispute that, there was a time when I was more like a mentor to him. And, I think he has grown to the point where we are truly colleagues now. And I'm still teaching him things, but he's teaching me things as well. There's plenty of things that he's better at than I am, or he has better insight into than I do. And, I think that is one of the advantages of mentoring somebody, is you're sort of raising up, this is the sort of person that I would like to have as a friend and a colleague. And when that pans out, I'm reaping the rewards of that now, which is wonderful.
That's awesome. Well, that's great to hear. I'm sure it warms his heart, because I know Carlos will be, of course, listening to this episode of the podcast, and it'll be nice for him to hear those kind words. I will say, if you're listening in, and if you're watching it on YouTube, feel free to type any questions you have into the chat. And of course, here on the panel, if you want to ask anything of Andrew, just unmute and I'll call on you. I see Joseph is typing in there and says, is Carlos going to be a guest on the Rec Poker Chats? Well, yeah, actually, Joe, we've had him on the show, and I think we just have to have him back again sometime soon. So we'll have to make that happen. He is a fun interview. There's no doubt about it.
His passion for poker is just, he's not literally a recreational poker player, but so many pros. I guess I would sort of put myself in this category, get a little jaded, and I don't think Carlos has that at all. He really is just he just loves it. Yeah.
Well, that's what we're all about here. That amateur experience of the game, loving the game itself. And, I think it's kind of inevitable if you're playing professionally. Anything you do professionally, the kind of enthusiasm, the shine might wear off a little bit. It's got to be less fun when it's work. You talked a little bit about that earlier. What are some parts of poker now that you still get excited about, or sort of get gleeful, or when you think about the game or the competition? Or I don't want to feed you, but what kind of things like that are you still excited about?
I really enjoy it. I mean, I've always been a person who enjoyed doing puzzles. So, like when I was a kid, I used to be able to buy at the grocery store these books of like logic puzzles, which a lot of people consider, like if you're taking the LSAT, for instance, there's like logic puzzles on there, and people hate them. And it was like a thing that I did just for fun, like do logic puzzles, or crossword puzzles, or that kind of thing. So that really is the enjoyment that I get from playing poker. And I think that if you want to, whether or not you're a professional, I think that if you want to be like a winning poker player, that's where your enjoyment has to come from. I mean, you're not going to be able to win money at poker and also kind of like ride the waves of variance and be like, oh, I'll just call to the river and see if I make a flush. This sort of like very, the kind of like gambler's mentality towards poker, or that's just a very casual, like, oh, I'm just going to sit and have some coffee and chat with my friends and like not take a lot of risk, the like old man coffee approach to poker. Neither of those things really works if you want to be, again, like you don't have to be a professional, but you do have to have that mindset of like, if I'm trying to win money at poker, then my enjoyment has to come from playing well and not from, playing mindlessly or yeah. I mean, it can't be the same, which is a problem. Like a lot of the people that I coach they're sort of already somewhat successful recreational players, and they have the idea of like, well, I really enjoy doing this thing. So like maybe if I just did it a little bit better, I could make money and also keep getting the enjoyment. And sometimes it's like some of the things that you enjoy, you're not going to be able to keep doing if you also want to make more money. There is going to be a little bit of a trade-off where you're going to have to find new things to enjoy to replace those the joy of calling and trying to flop a set or whatever.
Right. Although that is awfully fun. Well, that's so one question about enjoying poker. The World Series is here. Is kind of that annual experience that everyone gets excited about. Just before we went on the air, you mentioned that you're calling in from Baltimore, which I know is home these days, and that you were actually not planning on making it down to Vegas for the trip this year. What made that decision for you?
I don't know if you guys have heard about, there's this COVID thing that's going around.
What?
Yes, yeah. COVID. You can
ID. I have heard of that. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, this is I've fallen in a different place on this than most of the poker community, and I think we are at a point where people are. It's a kind of a question of how you're valuing the experience of being out there, I guess. I do follow I try to follow a lot of like doctors and things on Twitter and get a sense, because I don't think we're getting great information now from the government in terms of where things stand. And I do think there are a fair number of people who are like underestimating the risk of being out there, which isn't to say that it's necessarily the wrong decision for everyone to be out there. But I understand the fatigue that some people are feeling of just like, it's been 2+ years of this and I just don't want to think about it anymore. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's not, I think the risk, like the likelihood is not high of having a sort of, obviously like plenty of people are getting it and not necessarily experiencing catastrophic effects if they've been vaccinated and whatnot. But, on the other hand, like when you're playing a 8,000 to 10,000 person poker tournament, like you're banking on an unlikely good event happening to you, right? Like you're not terribly likely to win the main event either. So like, it seems a little weird to say, I'm just going to round to zero on like the unlikely negative outcome. But, maybe I'll win the main event. Who knows?
Well, I remember last year you were talking about how you felt like you were taking it a little more carefully than other people in the poker world. And have you started playing live at all, even in Maryland, or is it strictly?
I'm back to not playing live.
Right.
The rates are a lot higher now than they were even last summer. I mean, the infection rates are kind of around the country are higher than they were. So I have played live a few times in the last 2 years, but I have not done so recently.
Chris, jump on in there.
Yeah, well, I guess, Andrew, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I've been very cautious and very careful, and for a number of different reasons, family backgrounds and some health things within my own family. But I am curious about are you able to play online anywhere? Are you able to kind of scratch that poker itch, or do you get that anymore as somebody who's been in the poker world and played, how many hands? Does it feel like sometimes that you can just take a break and it's fine, or do you miss the game, or do you find outlets to play right now?
Both. I'm playing on America's Card Room. The games on there are not fantastic. There are things that I enjoy about live poker that, I definitely don't. when I was playing regularly, if I was going 3 or 4 times a week, I wasn't like itching to go every time that I went. It was a little like, I guess the way I put it was I enjoy my job more than most people enjoy their jobs, but I enjoy playing poker less than recreational players enjoy playing poker. Like, it is still a job. So I wasn't necessarily, like eager every time. We're at the point now where, I would downright enjoy going to play live. It's been long enough. And there are people that I miss seeing. And it's the bittersweetness of not being at the WSOP. One way I think of it is like, you win every tournament you don't enter. Like, you're always thinking like, oh, I could have won that maybe that was going to be the one that I would have won. And of course, you're friends with so many people in the poker community that it feels very available. You see the people who win and you think, oh, I know that person, I know that person, I know that person. It's easy to put yourself in their shoes. I mean, there's a fair chance I'm saving myself tens of thousands of dollars by not going out there. I'm trying to think of it in those terms.
That's probably a good way to think about it, if only for your own mental health, right? We got a question from Joseph here in the chat. It says that the WSOP is going on and a poker dealer color-up resulted in them being fired on the spot. How could this happen? And do you have any similar outrageous, crazy, what the heck WSOP experiences? And I think, first of all, that kind of stuff probably does happen more often than we know, because they're throwing a bunch of new dealers in there and it's a new location and that sort of thing. But what's your take on that aspect of the tournament structure?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tricky thing about the WSOP, because it feels weird. On the one hand, it's like, this is the premier poker event. You'd sort of think like, oh, all the best dealers in the country are going to be out there, right? Quite the opposite, right? I mean, actually, poker is booming everywhere in Las Vegas. So all of the casinos in Vegas, they need their own dealers. It's hard for them to, it's hard for the Rio to just pop up overnight and recruit all the local dealers, and it's expensive to bring in for people from out of the country. So there's actually quite a few people there who are not experienced dealers. And, I think that's just the nature of the thing. I mean, I don't know, I guess they have to make their own decisions. That actually seemed a little like, it's just my immediate reaction on hearing that was like, do they have to be fired on the spot? Like, is there not an opportunity to sort of like train them, or, people make mistakes on their first day. But I don't know, it's not really my place to like second guess those kinds of decisions. My most egregious dealer story it wasn't at the WSOP, but there was a time I had, check raised all in against someone. My own hand was not very good, but I thought that person was bluffing and so wasn't going to call me. So it was not a very large raise. And the person asked how much more, and the dealer's response was not that much more. I was like,
yeah, kind of might be influencing the action there a little bit. Yeah, just say a number. That's right. Oh, I love it. Well, I know a lot of us are getting ready to head down. A lot of recreational players, maybe they're going to go and take a shot this year or play in a bracelet event that they might not play in otherwise. When you are playing live, and especially in tournaments like this, when someone sits down and you kind of get a sense that they're a less experienced player, what are some of the assumptions that you make about their playing style, and like how might you try and take advantage of them? And then later, I'm going to ask you how maybe we can defend against that kind of stuff when we're in that spot.
At the WSOP specifically, it's often the opposite of what I might expect in a different context. You will often get the sense that this is a very special opportunity for this person. It may be a higher buy-in than what they usually play, or it might be they've traveled specifically to play this event, or one of maybe 3 or 4 events. They have sort of a WSOP budget, so it's not like when I'm playing a tournament, I have a bankroll and I have backers, and I'm like, if I think the tournament is a good deal, I'll keep re-entering it, and if I bust this one, I might go play one somewhere else, or it's all just sort of getting in hands for me. But my expectation is I know that there's a lot of people out there at the WSOP who are not approaching it that way. So in fact, you may find that those people are sort of overly cautious, especially in the first few levels. I think sometimes people also have goals that are not necessarily directly associated with EV, right? There's I just want to make it through day one, or I just don't want to be the first person out. I want to go out very quickly. And so, the expectation is they're probably not going to run huge bluffs in the first couple of levels. They might not make huge call downs. I think they're just sort of going to be cautious. I think that's sort of the overriding thing, is just that expectation of that they have other conflicting goals besides just wanting to make the most plus EV decision at every opportunity. And I'm a shark. I'm thinking about how can I use that against you. Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like you're not going to be expecting recreational players to, like you say, sort of make a big bluff in an early level, or to call down light. So I'm guessing that on your end, you kind of exploit them by overfolding to the large raises and, or, when they don't smell right, and executing more of those larger bluffs yourself, because you're just going to put them to the test where it's not likely that they have a great hand. Let me ask you, as a seasoned pro, how do you, it feels like professional players have this like innate sense of when another player is weak. And that's really such a gift when it comes to choosing when to bluff very strongly. How much of that is the front of your brain thinking about this player and the board texture and the action previously in the hand? And how much of it is just your brain telling you like, oh, this player's weak, let's just make a move here? You know what I mean? Like, how much of it is internalized already?
Yeah, that's a tricky question, because I think kind of by definition, you don't necessarily have access to that second part. I mean, like the whole point is that you're not fully intellectualizing it. I mean, for me at least, there's a lot of that frontline part. Like I'm very kind of analytical, and I mentioned the logic puzzles earlier. Like it is deductive logic for me. So I think I probably rely more heavily on that first part than some people do. But I mean, the second part is a big deal, especially when you're playing with less experienced players who, I mean, I guess, I don't know if we've gotten to the part where I'm telling you how to avoid this yet, but just truly like the less you say and do in a hand, the better. I mean, chatting between, even honestly, like even chatting between hands is kind of giving away information. I'll get that idea of like, oh, this person is just here for this weekend, or this person has never played the WSOP before. Like all that is stuff that I can use against you. But really, I mean, in a hand is much more dangerous of literally anything you say or do or your movements. There is that danger of, even if it's not always like, oh, he's left eye blinked, he's bluffing, he's weak. But you just get that general vibe coming off of someone of like, oh, this person is uncomfortable, or this person is excited. And the best way to avoid giving off that vibe is just to say and do as little as possible.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Just playing defense from the standpoint of just giving away as little as possible.
Yeah, Tommy Angelo calls it mum poker.
Mum poker. Yeah, that's right. Although we had him on the show recently, and he said he's kind of moving away from mum poker and doing more socializing while he's playing and getting into it. So
he's fully a recreational player now.
I think he's really enjoying it. We had a really fun conversation about that. So yeah, I mean, I'm sort of like good for him, but also, I mean, he says he's doing a lot better in the game too. So maybe he's just evolved as a player. So other than that, you led me right to it, Andrew. Other than that kind of, just not giving out as much information as possible, what are some other tips or exploits or techniques that inexperienced players can use to kind of give themselves the best chance of getting through that tournament?
I think you want to be realistic about what your goals are.
Yep.
And I think there are reasons why, like, I don't, maybe I said it in a slightly mocking tone when I was talking about the people, they're not going to play that many events, or they just really want to make it through day one or something. I mean, I think those are legitimate goals, but I think you should be explicit with yourself if that is the goal, and think about how you're going to build your strategy around that. Where like, if you're not going to be willing to make big call downs, then, that might just mean playing tighter pre-flop so that you don't get into the kinds of spots where you might need to make big call downs. I see that Kim is recommending just start day two, which is an interesting one. So I do think that from a purely EV perspective, honestly, like generally late registering is sort of plus EV for everyone. From like an ICM perspective, just being able to enter later is plus EV. And in particular, for people who maybe don't have, that like aren't necessarily favorites in the field, or a lot better than the people they're going to be playing against, like playing fewer hands can actually kind of be to your advantage. But it is less fun. So, if you're there and really your goal is like, I want this experience to last as long as possible. I mean, yes, you can guarantee you make day two by buying in on day two. But if what you really want is like, I want the experience of playing all of day one, then, you do want to get there on time. And then you also want to, I guess, sort of anticipate in advance what kind of situation is going to be bad and get out of it early, rather than like ending up in a big pot and then making a big fold because you're concerned about conserving the last of your chips or something. But I also think ultimately, like, what you want is not just to like sit there and be dealt cards. Right? I mean, I think what a lot of people want is to play well. It's going to be a more satisfying experience if you feel like I gave it my all and I left it all on the field. And I think just understanding that like that might involve going out in the first couple of levels. And there's plenty of poker to be played in Las Vegas. So I know it's disappointing to like go out of a $1,500 tournament and go play in like an $80 daily. But I mean, you're still playing cards. You can still win big money in those $80 dailies if you get lucky. So I think it might be a more positive experience for people if rather than thinking that like, or even if you know intellectually that this isn't true, just letting it creep into your head, that idea of like, well, something has gone wrong if I go out in level 2, right? That's like only a donkey would go out in level 2. No, I mean, it's entirely possible to play perfectly well and go out in level 2. So allowing yourself to accept that as a possibility rather than, oh, this will be a disaster and it'll be a blow to my ego and I have to tell all my friends or people who bought action or whatever. I mean, anyone you're selling action to, you should make sure you're only selling to people who understand these things and understand the risk they're taking. And they're not going to be asking you questions like, what do you mean you went out on a bluff? Right? Like, I mean... it is a personal choice, but I think that being explicit with what are the trade-offs you're willing to make and what really are your goals, I think that would help a lot of people to sort of avoid running into situations where they don't feel like they have good options.
That makes a lot of sense. So I'll just to take the curtain back. Kim's making fun of me in the chat here because so I satellited into the main this year. It'll be my first time playing in the main event, and I'm thirsty to enjoy every moment of it, but I'm also, I'd like to do as well as possible in it. And I think, obviously everyone who's playing in the event is a favorite to lose. So like no one should go into it thinking that they're going to win the tournament. But I'm honestly kind of unsure about whether I should register in day 1 or day 2. And people keep telling me like, yeah, the experience of day 1. But the more experienced players that I talk to, they makes it sound as though like that's an experience that they'd rather just skip. Like, I guess, well, let me ask you, Andrew, like, is there a certain number of times that you've played the event, the main event, where like day 1 starts to feel like a grind or a drag or something like that? Or
I honestly, I still enjoy the main event. There's not a lot of other poker tournaments where I'm like, yes, I actively want to be doing more of this. But like really the main event is a pretty special thing. The one thing I will say that it has going for it is you would like to make day 5 or day 6. And if you do, you will have played really, really intense poker for long hours for several days in a row. And subtracting 1 from that number of days that you've played it's quite a big deal. Mm-hmm. And I really felt this difference. I've been lucky enough to be deep several times in the main event, and most recently in 2019. And I really felt fatigued on what was my last day of that event. And I remember I was thinking like, I don't remember feeling this tired the last time I was deep in this main event. And I said, well, you were 8 years younger the last time you were deep in this event. Like, so, I do think, I see a couple of gray or bald heads around our audience here. Something to consider, stamina is a real thing. You can choose your day 1 also. So, choosing a day 1 that enables you to have a day off between day 2 and day 3, you'll appreciate that.
Yep, that's a great point. The 2 earlier day 1s, their day 2 is also a little earlier. So then there's a day off before day 3. If you play in days 1, C, and D, just for our listeners at home, you'll play in the second day 2, which then is followed immediately by day 3, which is when everyone joins. So that makes a lot of sense. Last question on that front. If you are registering for day 1, is there like a good day or a bad day? Is there a day that all the pros register for that you want to avoid or something like that? How would you guide yourself to choosing which day to register?
I don't think it makes a huge difference. So I think that really choosing what makes the most sense for your schedule and probably like we discussed, trying to get that day off if possible. But I know some people, if they have to take time off of work or something, it's easier for them to play a day that's closer. So often the last day 1 is generally considered the softest for exactly that reason, right? You'd rather be playing with people who are taking days off of work than people who are booking a house for 7 weeks and playing the entire series.
Yep.
So trying to play that last day, but then you don't get the day off between day 2 and day 3. The 4th of July, I think, is one of the start days this year. year, that's generally considered a less good day to play because on average, the non-Americans at the WSOP are much stronger than the average American who's there. Even for a non-professional European, it's still a much bigger commitment for them to travel from Europe or somewhere to play rather than someone just driving from California to Las Vegas or something. So, a lot more Americans are going to take off on the 4th of July. And I guess ideally, if you can time it, like I think there was one year when maybe like Germany and England were playing in a soccer match against each other or something. And that was like considered the day to play when all the Europeans are going to be watching some football match.
Oh, I love that. Well, those are those soft edges that you have to exploit, right? I mean, that's one game selection. I think people don't appreciate how important game selection is in the game of poker. So I want to talk a little bit about how to study and how to improve. You're a poker coach. I've gotten coaching from Andrew in the past, and I'd encourage everyone to do it. Andrew's really good at looking at your database and Poker Tracker 4. He's done a database review for me that really helped me open my eyes and helped me think about how I coach beginner and intermediate players as well. So obviously, one-to-one coaching is a great way. When you were learning more about the game yourself, I know it probably feels like a bit of a long time ago, the technology was completely different. How did you improve your own game back then? And then I'll ask you afterwards about how people can improve today.
I was big on books. I've always been a big reader even for non-poker stuff. So I read all the. I mean, at that time it was mostly like 2+2 was the main publisher. And then the 2+2 forums also were a great service. And I think those are not so great anyway. I mean, I go there sometimes to read gossip, but for actual like strategy content, I couldn't even tell you the last time I looked at like a strategy post on 2+2. So I think a lot of those conversations are now happening in different places have like Discord communities where I think you don't even necessarily have to be a paying member of a training site to get into their Discord or something. So I think there are probably some like chat groups where you can maybe you all have your own. That just having that kind of community. Of course, it's great if you can find people who are better than you, but even just having peers, just having that impetus to talk about hands and the motivation to be studying things together, I think that's really useful. And then training videos and that kind of thing are so much more advanced than they were when I was starting out. In terms of the content that's being presented, but also the way that you're presenting content. It used to be the standard video was someone would just kind of sit down and start playing and click record and sort of babble while they were playing, and whatever came out. And I think a lot more effort now goes into, I mean, speaking for myself, but also other people whose videos that I've seen, of experimenting with the format and thinking ahead of time about what are the concepts that I want to present, and making slides and choosing example hands that actually demonstrate those things. And even, like you mentioned, technology, obviously solvers are a huge thing that didn't exist, and at least as a consumer facing thing until about 5 years ago. And I don't really think it makes sense for most people to be doing their own solver work. Like, unless you're already a very high level player, it's a pretty big, really even more so than the money, at the time that goes into learning to use one well. But I mean, I think that is one of the benefit of training videos or even some books now. Essentially what you're doing is you're paying someone else to do the solver work for you and then present you with like the high level takeaways. And the people who are really good at that can even, kind of help you navigate, because the solver, I mean, they're great, but it's a really overwhelming output to look at just this grid of all this like mixed strategies, and having a guide through that to call your attention to the things that are important. I think that's really valuable. So I think at this point, there's really no reason you shouldn't really be learning from people who are not giving you solver informed insights. But that's not the same as saying that you should be doing your own solver work. I don't think that makes sense for most people.
Yeah, that's been a recurring theme in a lot of these interviews that we've done with pros, saying that, the solver work is very valuable, but it takes a lot of time, and there's sort of an opportunity cost to doing that yourself. And that there's lots of people out there who are really, really good at working with solvers and distilling that information and doing it quickly and efficiently. And that it's a real benefit to have them sort of be the curator of that knowledge and sort of like help you, show you the results and help you understand what that means for your poker game and that sort of thing. And I think that makes perfect sense to me. Are there a few people in your mind that you think are like really good at that? Who do you look to now when you're trying to get advice or to talk to someone to brush up things that you're not sure of?
Let's see. I guess some of the stuff that I've been watching most recently. So I've been making videos for Solve for Why now. I've been doing some content for them, which means I also get access to their content.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And so when I'm talking about people who are like innovating what you can do with video training, I think they're far and away in terms of the format and the different ways that they're presenting information. I think there's a lot of good stuff on there. Of the people on that site, Matt Hunt is probably the one who's most my speed in terms of how he like thinks about the game and how he presents things. So I think his material on there is really good. In particular, there's he has a series on there that's called Three's a Crowd, which is about using solvers to look at multi-way spots, which, almost all, like if my books, for instance, is entirely about heads-up situations. And that's because multi-way solvers are fairly new. And this is really the first time that I've seen, there might be other material out there that I'm not familiar with, but this is the first time that I've seen someone really break down. I felt like I learned a ton from that, where it was not entirely, obviously I have a lot of experience playing multi-way pots, and I've tried to think about how to apply concepts to multi-way pots, but I felt like I learned a ton from actually seeing someone show work to back up certain things that I had believed or certain things that I wasn't sure about. And then the other one I've been liking is Patrick Leonard has a course on what's the name of that site? Phil Galfun's Run. Yeah, it is Run It Once.
Run It Up? Yeah, Run It Once.
Yeah, Run It Once. Sorry, that's it. Run It Once and Run It Up are so familiar, or so similar to each other.
I was going to say Run It Once, and it's called Pads on Pads.
That's right, yes.
There you go.
And I think that's also very good. And it's the same thing where, it is solver-based. He kind of goes through, everything is very solver-informed, but he's pulling out big picture trends and kind of highlighting them and saying, like, here are the takeaways from this. There's not an expectation that you're necessarily doing the solver work yourself.
Yeah, that's great. And that's Kim chipping in there. Kim's very familiar with solvers and Solve for Why. We love Solve for Why here too. They're one of our learning partners. So if folks want to come and get a taste of Solve for Why, you can watch a lot of their videos free here, included with your premium membership. And it really is cutting edge, and it's an exploitative style that I think is very different from a lot of the other learning material out there. That's really exciting and fun. So speaking about learning material, so Andrew, you've got a new book out, Essential Poker Concepts Volume 2. This is sort of a collection of previously written articles and essays by you in various different publications that you've put together here. And what can we expect if we open this up? What are we going to find in here?
It is a hopefully entertaining collection of, and these are like very short essays. So, like 1,500-ish words, which would be kind of the equivalent of like maybe 2 to 3 pages on Word, just to give people an idea of how long these are. So these are like little quick hits of poker thoughts. For people who are familiar with my Play Optimal Poker books, in many ways, this is kind of the opposite of that. Like the Play Optimal Poker books are really rigorous, kind of establishing an idea and like building it up over time very methodically. And these articles, in some cases, exploring the same context. As you mentioned, these are articles that I wrote a few years ago for 2+2 magazine before I had published the Play Optimal Poker books. So in some cases, it was interesting to look back over the stuff that I had written and to see, as early as maybe like 2013 or 2014, I was already playing around with these ideas that I ended up publishing in a book in 2019. So that was really interesting for me to see. And I was careful about what I chose because not everything that I wrote in 2013 necessarily stands up where I'm like proud of it now 9 years later, but much of it did. And I looked through it to make sure that it was still something that I was that I would want to share with the world, that there's not like wrong information in there. And then some of it is dealing with softer skills, like what we were talking about earlier, of being explicit about what are your, like, of course everyone wants to make money when they play poker, but what else is important to you besides that? I think even for people who are professionals, like honestly, if the only thing you cared about was making money, you could probably make more of it doing something other than poker. So there's something else you're looking for besides just making money. I think the more explicit you are with that, with yourself about that, you can make better decisions about what games it makes sense for you to play and how to approach those games and how to get better and how to navigate the conflicts that might come up between wanting to make money and wanting to, be respected by your peers or something like that. So a fair number of the essays are dealing with what you might call soft skills like that, or dealing with the frustrations of poker, thinking about how to get better at poker and how to concentrate your efforts, and what might be uncomfortable about getting it better at poker and how to overcome that resistance. So just, essays on a lot of those different topics.
Nice. And is that available at nitcast.com?
Yeah, the ebook is available at nitcast.com. That's in a few different ebook formats, like an EPUB or a PDF or a Kindle, and then Amazon. For if you want paper, you have to get that through Amazon, and then of course you can get a Kindle version through Amazon as well.
Right on. Chris?
Andrew, I wanted to kind of jump in and from my talk a little bit about some of the concepts that have been in your books, particularly around the toy games. You mentioned puzzles as being something that sort of drives you intellectually around, like, inside and outside of poker. But then for me, Play Optimal Poker, one of your first books that came out, really helped me solidify my understanding of concepts of GTO, and it did this through this exploration of sort of the idea of toy games. And I'm wondering, number one, as you've thought, and you've continued to play around with that concept a little bit in some of your coaching and some of your teaching and some of your other writing, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about toy games. And I guess in particular, the question I wanted to ask you was, is there a variation of, based on all that kind of thinking you've done around that and around the kind of puzzles and toy games, is there a variation of poker that you wish would exist, or you think like could take the game another step forward? I've heard people mention like adding a fifth suit, or like some of those kinds of things. Is there anything that you can imagine that would make poker even that much more interesting?
Okay, I have a lot to say about this, and I'm excited about the second part of that question. So if I forget to answer it, please prompt me again to talk about the variations on the game. In terms of toy games, I guess I'll say first, for people who may not know what those are, a toy game is like a kind of a simplified version of poker that really just boils it down to a single concept and enables you to focus on that one concept. So when you play a game like No Limit Hold'em, there are a lot of different things going on. There are lots of different hand values. There are lots of different hands that you can make. Hands change value as new cards come out. You can choose different bet sizes, and there's strategy, there's position, like strategy. There's strategy attached to every single one of those things. So there's tons of different skills that go into playing No Limit well. And if you want to understand one of those concepts in isolation, a toy game can help you. Like, what if we just forget about hands changing values and we can just think about, that helps us to think more about bet size, for instance, or decisions of which streets to bet. So a toy game is a way of simplifying, sometimes simplifying it extremely. So like the early examples in Play Optimal Poker just involve being dealt a single card from a 3-card deck. There's either an ace or a king or a queen. And the goal is just have a bigger card than your opponent. Hands don't change value. There's no new cards that are dealt. So that's like, you can recognize the similarity to poker, but of course it's a much, much simpler game than No Limit Hold'em. And we could even play that game without raising and then make the game simpler. So the idea is to kind of boil it down to its very simplest form, to understand, crystallize your understanding of some of the core concepts, and then start to add things back in. So, okay, now let's add raising and see how that changes the game. Now let's add the possibility of multiple streets of betting and see how that changes the game. And you can learn one at a time what do each of these elements of the game add, what is their like strategic significance, and you can think about them in isolation, which I find useful. Not everybody's brain works the same way. I understand that I have like a kind of highly logical brain. I have a philosophy degree. I like understanding things from first principles. That's not how everyone approaches things. So I actually kind of tricked people with Play Optimal Poker too. There was a lot of feedback on Play Optimal Poker. Some people didn't really care for toy games or had trouble connecting with them. So everything in Play Optimal Poker 2, well, almost everything in Play Optimal Poker 2 looks like a real no limit hand. You're dealt 2 cards, and the betting rules are similar to No Limit and that kind of thing. But the truth is, they're still toy games. Anything that's done with a solver is a toy game. When you work with a solver, you are introducing artificial constraints. You're telling the solver, you're not actually solving No Limit Hold'em. You're solving a restricted game where only certain bet sizes are allowed. Solvers don't consider every possible bet size on every street. If you're good at setting up a solve, which is part of why I say it doesn't make sense for most people to do their own solver work, because that's a skill in and of itself, learning how to give a solver an input that will give you an interesting output or meaningful output. But people who know how to put them together well, one of the skills there is, how can I simplify the game without taking away something important? So if you don't give a player, if when you're inputting the betting options for the solver, if you don't allow one player the opportunity to raise, for instance, that dramatically changes the opponent's strategy, right? If you could bet and have no fear of getting raised, that's going to have huge implications for your betting strategy. So, it doesn't necessarily matter as much, like, is it important that you be allowed to raise 60% of the pot versus 40% of the pot? That's maybe not such an important difference. So understanding, how can I simplify the game without losing anything that's too important? That's a skill. So everything or most of what's in Play Optimal Poker 2 looks a lot more like what we would call real poker situations, but they are still toy games. There are still constraints attached to them. And I think that's useful for learning. In terms of, sorry, did you want to jump in?
No, I just wanted to make sure you were prompted to.
Honestly, just me telling you to prompt me was partly me like storing that in my head to prompt myself. So in terms of changing the game, there's one thought that I had for a long time, like even before solvers existed. I always thought it would be kind of interesting if, they do that like 50K players championship with the WSOP. And I really thought like the true test of skill would be, what if everyone played a game that had never been played before? So there wasn't a possibility to, memorize strategies or anything like that. It truly was just a test of like, how well do you understand core poker concepts? And, I don't think it's feasible to do this maybe, but if you could like randomize how many betting streets there were, randomize, is this a draw game or is this a limit or a no limit game? And if you roll dice or pull numbers from a hat or whatever, that could be kind of interesting. That's like an idea that I've toyed around with for a while. And then more recently, I think there's been, and I think we probably will need to innovate in this direction, at least for online poker, is, people have been thinking about how can we change the game in a way that will make it harder for solvers to address in real time. I mean, right now, we're kind of at the cusp. Honestly, I don't even keep up with this stuff quite as much as I probably should. But I mean, we're pretty close to the point where people can be, solving things in real time. And this is something that like chess and backgammon and some other games have had to deal with for a long time. And my understanding is like they don't have great solutions. Like I think people just don't play backgammon or chess for money online. and poker is we're already kind of confronting that problem, and we're going to be confronting it a lot more in the next couple of years. So I think like what Run It Once, the poker site, did, which was pretty interesting, was the way that they did rakeback. They had what was called Splash the Pot, where they would sometimes just randomly add money to the pot. And that by itself, that's a huge change of the game. If there's like 3 extra big blinds in the middle of the pot, everything is out the window. Like starting ranges are dramatically different if there's more money in the pot to fight over. And you're not going to be able to, a solver is not necessarily going to be able to address that in real time. So like that's an example of that. I've seen other people suggest like, what if you exposed a single card and took it out of the deck, which is already a thing that could happen accidentally. But what if we did that on purpose? Before everyone gets dealt a pre-flop hand, and then we expose a single card, throw it away. That card's not going to be dealt. And that will have, it'll be a smaller change, but the solution to that game will be different. And that's theoretically something a solver could address, but you couldn't just open a book as you could now and look at solved pre-flop ranges for that game, because it's really 52 different games, right? with 52 different cards that can be removed. So I think we're going to see I hope we see some innovation in that direction, because otherwise online poker at least is going to be in trouble.
Yeah, I really like that line of thinking about it. I love backgammon, and you're completely correct that it killed the game. You can't play online for money because you're just playing against bots that are going to be playing perfectly, and it really. I do see that coming for poker, at least in the solved games that we're coming across. Like No Limit Hold'em has varieties of bet sizing that make it a little harder to solve than some other games, but the technology is getting there, and I think we're seeing it at the highest levels now, but it's only a matter of time until we have to kind of start playing offense, I think, and not playing defense on some of this stuff. Mm-hmm. We got a couple comments I just want to catch up with the chat here. So Kim says, in summarizing our day 1, day 2 discussion, so for a complete main event experience, you're better off playing day 1C or 1D. But to maximize your EV and your best shot at going for the money, start day 2. And just start that much closer to it. I think that makes a lot of sense. And John says, I like to think of these toy games as simplified models instead of toy games. Yeah, I think that's getting at exactly the same thing that Andrew was talking about there. So Joseph in the YouTube chat says, exposing a random card could be a bracelet event. I'd play it. Yep, I think that's a good one. Martha just wants you to know that you're an interesting and thoughtful guest, Andrew. So there you go. You got that. You can put that on your resume. Type Login says that chess kind of does the random gaming variation with Chess 960 or Fisher Random, which I'm not actually familiar with that. But,
I almost made that analogy myself, but yeah, I don't really know that much about chess. I know exactly that much.
Yeah,
I know that exists. I don't know a lot more about it.
Nice, Kim. Why don't you jump in there with something?
Yeah, no, I have a couple of questions. One's sort of general and one's more personal, but the general question is like the hot spots in poker today on the social media side seem to be women in poker and cheaters in poker. So I don't want to talk about the cheaters. I want to talk about the women in poker. And I want to know if you have anything to add to how you think we might get more women into the game. Like it's the same, it seems to be the same old thing coming around, but
I just watched a great conversation between 2 of these people have been guests on my podcast. The third, I hope to have one soon. Jen Shahadi, who some of you may know, chess in addition to poker. A woman named Dr. Kamikaze, who's like a mixed game player. And Jen Jacobs is the third person. And this is available on Twitch at thepokermix.ca, I think, or the PokerMix is the name of the Twitch channel. PokerMix.ca is Cammy's website. But there's about 2.5 hours of the 3 of them talking, and they all have somewhat different perspectives on this, but they clearly like respect each other. And so, I mean, I think essentially it's like you need to ask women and like understand what are the barriers to them. I mean, I think part of it is like how much of a priority is it actually, right? I mean, it's like, yes, it would be. I mean, I don't think there are very many poker site operators who don't want women playing. The question is like, what risks are you willing to take, or what sacrifices are you willing to make? So like one of the examples that came up in there is like, what about childcare, right? I mean, if you wanted more women to come, probably providing like on-site childcare would make that easier. I feel like if you tried to offer that suggestion to any of the people who go on Twitter and are like, well, what are we supposed to do? We've been trying these same things. Like all those people would sort of be like, well, we're not going to offer childcare. So it's not like the ideas aren't out there. I feel like that some people have an idea of just sort of like what's reasonable or what they're willing to do. And then, the other one that I remember coming up in that conversation was, really taking seriously the kind of like harassment or abuse that happens at the table. And, I think everyone is subject to this to some degree. Like I've certainly had people treat me at the table in ways that I didn't like, but I get the impression that women are exposed to more of this and, have reason to expect that they're going to be exposed to more of this. And I think there's also a feeling of when it happens, I mean, obviously it sucks when it happens, but also if it happens and it feels like kind of people are okay with it or it's allowed to happen, that's like its own bad experience on top of the, having been abused. So, and I think to some degree, like there is a correlation between people that the casino really wants to have there, people with the kind of impulse control problems that make them very profitable gamblers. There's probably some correlation there to people who treat their opponents or their female opponents badly. And it may just be that the casinos are like, as much as they would like to have women there playing, when push comes to shove, like they'd rather have the, drunk millionaire who is mean to women. And if they have to choose between those 2 people, they're going to go where the money is. And I don't know what exactly to do about that. But I think, making explicit that that's what's happening, maybe is a useful first step.
Right. Well, I think the poker operators clamping down on abusive behavior is probably a lot more of a thing we might get to happen than the childcare.
Yeah.
This is probably not going to happen. Can I ask my second question?
Get in there.
Okay. So on a personal note, I'm studied player in all sorts of solve for why, pads on pads, raise your edge, learn pro poker, tournament edge. What is the best way to bring all of that knowledge together in an old brain? Or an aging brain. Let's not go old. An aging brain. Is that to get a personal coach, or is it to somehow, like, I just can't seem to, like, I keep jumping around from information to information and I can't seem to bring it all together cohesively.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure aging brain doesn't help, but I don't think that's the central problem. I mean, I a lot of the people who come to me for one-on-one coaching of all different ages are reporting that same issue of, there's tons of content out there, but like, how do I sort through it, or how do I prioritize? And I do think prioritizing, like, I think a coach can certainly help you determine like what are the skills that you should be working on, but I think making a choice of like wanting to work on a specific skill. So like, I really want to work on hand reading. And rather than just sort of consuming poker content generally, watching whatever training video happens to be next in the series that you were watching, or listening to whatever poker podcast, whatever guest happens to be on your favorite poker podcast today, really having a sense of like, I'm trying to study hand reading right now. And then you're seeking out material on hand reading. You know that when you go to play poker, hand reading is the main thing you're going to be working on. And you make some tangible progress on hand reading, and then you decide to work on something else. A coach may be able, like, that is a big part of what I do, is kind of helping people to determine what order to do those things in, and provide some of that structure. But I think it is feasible to do that for yourself also. And I think structuring is the most important thing, because I mean, there's plenty of content that's out there, and it's certainly not hurting you to bring it in. But I think bringing it in a more thoughtful and structured way is going to be more useful than just having like the fire hose.
Yeah, and I've also heard from clients that just having some accountability and some structure, and just like a sense of what you're going to be working on after this, it can help people kind of stay on track and really get the most out of it, because the motivation can be an issue as well. Kim, did you have something else there?
No, I just disconnected for the first part of his answer, so I'll have to go back and watch the replay, but thank you very much for the second part.
Bad timing there.
We just got
signing up for private coaching, I think, but I'm like, that's what I got. So.
Yeah. Well, I don't think, there's so many good people out there to work with these days that it's really just about finding the right fit for you. And, Kim, you're such a savvy player. I'm sure just having someone that you could talk to and to sort of set a path for you, I think would work wonders. So, Andrew, if folks do want to get in touch with you about coaching, which I would personally recommend, and I'd encourage everyone to go and book some of your time, what's the best way for them to reach out to do so when they want to connect?
My website is thinkingpoker.net, thinkingpoker.net/coaching. There's information on there about coaching. Obviously, there's a link that says coaching on thinkingpoker.net that you can click. I'm at Thinking Poker on Twitter, Andrew at thinkingpoker.net. If you want to just email me, basically, however I'm not too hard to find on the internet, and whatever means you have of contacting me, I'll get back to you in that same format, and I can answer whatever questions you have. And as you mentioned, there's one-on-one coaching, there's the books, I have training videos, different places. I also make like a customized video, as I did for you, where people can send me a hand history or a database, and I'll like record my thoughts, and that's kind of an in between, like pricing wise, it's cheaper than doing like one-on-one via Skype or something, but more than a book would be.
Yep. And extremely, extremely valuable, folks. So I'd encourage everyone to do that. Last question from YouTube chat. This comes from Joseph Koulis, who I know is a big fan of the Thinking Poker podcast.
I'm a big fan of Joseph Koulis's.
He wants to know, can you just comment on how much better you are than Harrington in every way?
I actually got myself in some trouble for doing that a long time ago. But
I was going to say, there must be a story here.
I wrote a pretty scathing review of one of the Harrington books. And yeah. But I don't know if Harrington is really still, I don't get the impression that he's like in the mix that much anymore. I think he, as I would, if I had the sort of income that he did, I think I would just be chilling.
Yep, that's right. And we got one more comment here from Crazy Gamble Series joining us in the YouTube chat. Poker breeds from straight up gambling fools upwards, or straight up math like nerds downwards. Finds a happy medium. So yeah, you got to find a path for you. Crazy Gamble Series. That's right. All right. Well, Andrew, this is such a pleasure. I know we got some good information out there for some folks looking to take their game to the next level. We told them where they can reach you. Once we say goodbye near the end of the episode here, we'll do a contest. We'll do a draw where folks can win a copy of Essential Poker Concepts Volume 2. So, folks, if you're watching along on YouTube, just type the word contest in the chat right now. And then once we're finished talking about the home game results and everything, we'll roll a die and get ourselves a winner. But in the meantime, Andrew, thank you so much. I so relish these opportunities to talk. And I know I won't see you in Vegas, but I hope our paths do cross again sometime real soon.
Thank you all very much. Have a good night.
All right. Take care. So, John Somsky, another week in the world of rec poker, another week of rec poker home game winners. How do you do it, man?
Well, I set them up and they will come. That was a Field of Dreams reference for those of you who weren't alive then.
Some of those other gray hairs in our audience, right?
Yeah. So we had our No Limit Hold'em Championship Series on June 1st, and none other than the great Binkley Eric Jim got his first victory of the year, second lifetime.
He's due. Eric, where have you been, man? We're used to you winning these left, right, and center. Congratulations, bud.
Then for the nightly series on May 30th, Glassjaw 2222, Dave Schoen got his first nightly victory for the year.
Nice.
Now then, KB Doug Behrens got his fourth of the year. Just
such a good
stacking
guy.
them up.
Doug's awesome.
JD Cat, Jeff 32, Jeff Catalano got his first nightly victory for the year. And PCS 2005, Jack LaRue got his second nightly victory of the year.
Beautiful.
And he's been on a tear lately, because then we have Michael Babker, he got his third nightly victory for the year. But then we come back to PCS 2005, Jack LaRue. He got his second daily mixed practice.
Oh, wow. Those are not easy to win.
No. And now we have East Coast Bitter Ben, who's been away for a while, got his first international victory for the year. 7 High 11, John Crowell got his first international victory for the year.
Nice.
And then to sum it all up, we're back to PCS 2005. Jack LaRue won the LPP Sunday event, so you can contact Jim at rec.poker to get your free month at Learn Pro Poker.
That is right. And that's so cool, because I just gave Jack a shout out like 2 weeks ago on the podcast, I think, talking about how encouraging and positive and how he's always smiling and having a great time when he's in the room. And there he is, just crushing souls out there in the home game. That's beautiful. Nicely done, Jack. And sorry, who did you say won the LPP Sunday night tournament there, John?
Jack.
Oh, it was Jack as well. Okay, Jack.
It was Jack.
Oh, my God.
He won 3 tournaments this week.
That's phenomenal. Well, Jack, send me that email, Jim at rec.poker, and we'll get you your free month at Learn Pro Poker. You're going to love it. And I did get an email from Kelly. I guess we should give her the free month, although I maintain that we shouldn't let Kelly Stork get any better at poker. So I'm considering giving her like a fake code that she'll just get an error message or something. So Kelly, but I've already said that on the air. Oh no. Kelly, just enter that code like normal. I'm sure that'll work perfectly. And Jack, I'll send you the real code. Don't worry. We'll get it all taken care of.
And just one other thing, don't forget that on June 18th, which should be just a few days after this podcast comes out, at 1:00 p.m. on Saturday, Central Time, there will be the Heads Up event. So if the winner of that Heads Up event gets an automatic entry into Marek Madness.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. There's no late registration for that one. Don't forget, folks. So Saturday, June 18th, 1:00 Central, 2:00 Eastern. Get in that lobby a few minutes early and sign up for that event, because that's going to be a lot of fun.
We also had our first Fun Country event this week, right?
Did.
So who won that?
Well, we actually had 2 winners this week. I was happy to announce one of them is in the room right now, our very own Kim Kilroy. Pet Vet got to take one down, and Evil Roy took one down as well. Dave, who's a very involved Tuesday night OPA participant. So I was glad to see the OPA crowd taking down the hardware. And so every Tuesday night, all our premium members are invited to come and play in this Fun Country online play and hang. There's going to be a 9-person tournament every week. The first 9 folks to sign up get to play, and then the winner gets a $50 Amazon gift card. So that's and listen, even though the 2 winners this week were Canadian, that Amazon gift card is in US dollars. So you got a little extra cream on your muffins.
Extra value. I like
exactly.
it.
I've been listening to way too many of the Poker Guys podcasts lately, because I go through cycles where I'm catching up on some of my podcasts, and I got to stop listening to Jonathan, because I tend to mimic the people that I listen to a lot, and I'm doing this real Jonathan vibe over the last 2 weeks of the podcast here, and there's only one Jonathan Levy. I don't know if
extra cream on your muffin.
Yeah, that's exactly where it came from.
That's what we just give.
Yeah, you got a little extra cream on your muffin. That's Jonathan right there. I hold him responsible for that.
Yeah, I think one Jonathan Levy is plenty. I enjoy having that one, but that's enough.
How does one collect their $50 Amazon gift card in US dollars?
Ooh, yes. No, I'm going to take care of all that magically behind the scenes, because I already have all our premium members' contact information. I'm going to let Scott over at Fun Country know about it, and he'll get that to you directly. So that's exciting. And every week now for the next few months, come out on Tuesday night. If you're a premium member, make $50 the easy way. Just have to beat 8 other Rec Poker premium members in our Fun Country OPA. So go check that out. That's going to be a lot of fun for sure. And we did tease at the top, Rec Poker Weekend is coming up. So that's going to be June 24th and 25th at Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. We're going to have a tournament series. I'm going to play as a bounty in some of them. There's going to be some other prizes. We're going to do some bomb pots. And the player of the series who gets the most points throughout the entire tournament series is going to win $200 in Lammers, I think, to tournaments at Running Aces, plus a free year of premium membership at Rec Poker and some other fun stuff like that. So that's going to be a lot of fun as well. And then don't forget, if you're in Las Vegas on Monday, June 27th, it's time for the Rec Poker Meetup. It's going to be at 10 a.m. somewhere very close to the Grand Ballroom at Bally's. We don't know exactly.
I will post it in the travel group.
Yes, we'll get that all posted up in the forums there. We'll probably share that a few places. Yeah, type login. Has anyone mimicked the Rec Poker podcast? Often imitated, never duplicated. It's just the highest form of flattery is what I like to think there, Joe. And speaking of podcast events coming up, so we do have some folks traveling around. So we're going to be adjusting the schedule a little bit. Some folks will notice on June 20th, which is my birthday, by the way. How am I celebrating it? I get to do 2 podcast interviews. We are going to interview the Poker Guys that day. It's at an earlier recording time because they couldn't make the usual time. So on June 20th, make sure you check I'll put Twerp out that week, letting people know. And Twerp, this week in Rec Poker. It's our free newsletter. You can sign up on the homepage. I send it out once a week with a full itinerary of what's going on that week. And it's a really great way to kind of keep in touch with what's happening in the evenings around here and what you don't want to miss. So I'll send that out as well. But we're also going to be interviewing Kara Scott from the Heart of Poker that day as well. That'll also be earlier in the day, and we'll be releasing that a little later on as well. So if folks see a couple changes in the schedule for June, it's just because with WSOP coming on, folks are traveling around, and some events might get postponed or moved around or something like that, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, should we do the contest here? Let's just, so I see, I'm going to roll a die here. I'm going to start at the top. And so let me see, from Evil Roy down. And let's see who the winner is this week. It is Type Login. Joe, you won, my man. So Joseph Foss, Type Login, now that I'm doxing you, and everyone knows what your real name is and your handle on YouTube, because I'm not that savvy when it comes to these kinds of things. But send me an email, please, sir, and I will make sure that you get a copy of that download link, and you can enjoy that. Sorry, Kim, didn't quite make it, but next week. Yeah, I know. Sorry, you got enough perks coming up down here through your position on the Wrecking Crew. Okay, well, what else? We must be getting pretty close to the end of it here. Chris? What else is going on that's exciting and interesting and fun in Rec Poker land these days?
Well, we're really spending our month here. The videos have been released about c-betting in position, and I am working right now on the July topic, which is c-betting out of position. So, which is a very different beast, and that's, I think, the one that maybe people struggle with more. So I'm really excited to have these conversations kind of back to back. So those will be our next two deep dives in terms of our premium content.
And if you are listening to this live on YouTube, then you're going to have a chance on Wednesday, June 8th, to join me and Sky Matsuhashi in our monthly The Focus. So as Chris points out, this month we're focusing on c-betting in position. So Sky is going to be showing us how to use Poker Tracker 4 to get the most out of that enviable spot. So filters we can run, reports we can run, how to encounter those kind of circumstances. We'll probably talk a little bit about sizing. We'll talk about different flop textures and how to proceed. And every month we focus on a different tool on how to get the most out of that theme. So I'm looking forward to that with Sky Matsuhashi. And then I guess the following Wednesday on June 15th at 8 p.m. Eastern, sorry, that's not right, at 9 p.m. Eastern, there is going to be our monthly Unshuffled mixed game demo with Jake Hirschfield from Unshuffled. So every month we're going to be looking at a different mixed game and going through his platform, Unshuffled, trying to figure out how to play it, how to teach it to other people. And then that'll be that game will be the theme of the month, the next month in our Rec Poker home game series. So if you like mixed games, 2022 is the year. We're getting more into it here at Rec Poker. Come join our mixed game group and get more involved in that. Well, I think other than that, we just got the usual 33 things every freaking day around here. Lord knows it's hard to get through a day of Rec Poker without getting involved in a couple home games, some live Zoom learning sessions, some fun strategy discussions. It's just got a lot going for it. So without any further ado, I want to thank our Wrecking Crew members, Rob, Kim, Chris, and John for joining me here in the show, and Woody in the YouTube chat, along with two Joes in the YouTube chat this week, and Dave and Martha and Crazy Gamble Series. And let me see, website amp and Running Aces Hotel and you.